Millionaire woman marries poor student for love 7 days later. She finds out who he is. The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows of the small courthouse in downtown Portland, Oregon, as Alexandra Montgomery signed her name to the marriage certificate that would unite her life forever with James Sullivan, a struggling graduate student whose total worldly possessions could fit inside a single worn duffel bag. At 29, Alexandra commanded a personal fortune of over $300 million, inherited from her family's pharmaceutical empire and multiplied through her own shrewd investments in biotechnology and sustainable energy. Yet, as she watched James carefully write his signature with the deliberate precision of someone unaccustomed to signing important documents, Alexandra felt richer than she had ever felt in her privileged life. The simple gold band on her finger had cost less than she typically spent on a single dinner, but it represented something that all her wealth had never been able to purchase: genuine, unconditional love from someone who valued her for exactly who she was rather than what she possessed. Their courtship had been a carefully guarded secret, conducted in coffee shops, public parks, and the university library, where James spent most of his time researching his doctoral dissertation in social justice and economic inequality. Alexandra had met him 6 months earlier during a guest lecture she had given at Portland State University about sustainable business practices, and their connection had been immediate and profound. James had approached her after the lecture with thoughtful questions about corporate responsibility that revealed both his intelligence and his genuine concern for society's most vulnerable populations. Unlike the countless individuals who sought her attention for financial gain or social advancement, James seemed completely unaware of her wealth, treating her simply as an interesting speaker whose ideas merited serious discussion. Their relationship had developed through long conversations about philosophy, social justice, and their shared vision of a more equitable world. Alexandra discovered that James worked 3 part-time jobs to pay for his education, tutoring undergraduate students, delivering food for a local restaurant, and doing weekend maintenance work at a community center. Despite his financial struggles, he maintained an optimism and generosity of spirit that attracted Alexandra more powerfully than any display of wealth or status ever could. What Alexandra found most remarkable about James was his complete contentment with his simple life. He spoke about his research with passion, his students with affection, and his future career in social work with excitement that never acknowledged the financial limitations that would characterize such a path. His apartment was a tiny studio filled with secondhand books and furniture, but James treated it like a palace, proud of every small improvement he had managed to afford. Their secret courtship had been necessary because Alexandra's family would never have approved of her relationship with someone they would consider financially and socially inappropriate. The Montgomery family had built their pharmaceutical fortune through 3 generations of strategic marriages, careful social positioning, and ruthless business practices that had eliminated countless competitors. Alexandra's choice of romantic partner was expected to strengthen the family's power and influence rather than diminish it. Alexandra's mother, Catherine Montgomery, had spent years orchestrating introductions to appropriate suitors, heirs to industrial fortunes, successful investment bankers, and rising political figures whose connections could benefit the family's business interests. The idea that Alexandra would choose to marry a graduate student surviving on food stamps and student loans would be viewed as not just poor judgment, but active betrayal of family expectations and social responsibility. The decision to marry in secret had been Alexandra's, motivated by her recognition that James represented everything she had been searching for throughout her adult life. Their 6-month courtship had convinced her that genuine compatibility and shared values mattered more than financial equality or social approval. James's integrity, intelligence, and compassion made him a better partner than any of the wealthy suitors her family had promoted. The simple courthouse ceremony had been attended only by 2 witnesses they had recruited from among the other couples waiting to be married. Alexandra wore a simple blue dress that she had purchased specifically for the occasion, avoiding any display of luxury that might make James uncomfortable or attract unwanted attention. James had borrowed a suit from a friend, and the nervous pride in his expression as he spoke his vows revealed the magnitude of this moment in his life. Their wedding night had been spent in James's tiny studio apartment, sharing takeout Chinese food and planning their future together. Alexandra had already made the decision to support James's education and career goals without overwhelming him with the full extent of her wealth. She planned to gradually reveal her financial resources in ways that would enhance their life together, without making James feel dependent or inadequate. The first week of their marriage unfolded in a bubble of domestic bliss that Alexandra had never imagined possible. She found genuine joy in the simple routines of James's life: grocery shopping with careful attention to budget constraints, cooking meals together in his cramped kitchen, and spending evenings reading while James worked on his dissertation. The contrast between this modest lifestyle and her previous existence among luxury and privilege was dramatic but surprisingly fulfilling. Alexandra had taken a temporary leave from her business responsibilities, telling her assistant and board members that she needed time for personal reflection and strategic planning. Her absence from social events and business meetings would eventually attract attention, but she wanted to establish her marriage firmly before facing the inevitable family crisis that revelation would trigger. James, meanwhile, continued his normal routine of classes, research, and part-time work, treating Alexandra's presence in his life like a wonderful dream that he was afraid might end if he examined it too closely. He had never asked about Alexandra's background or financial situation, accepting her vague explanations about freelance consulting work and inherited investments that allowed her flexibility in her schedule. Their conversations during this honeymoon period revealed the depth of compatibility that had convinced Alexandra to make such a dramatic life change. James's research into economic inequality aligned perfectly with Alexandra's growing interest in using her wealth for social impact rather than personal luxury. They spent hours discussing potential solutions to systemic poverty, educational access, and healthcare disparities that affected the communities James studied. Alexandra found herself falling even more deeply in love with James as she observed his daily interactions with the world around him. He treated everyone, from his professors to the homeless individuals he encountered during his food delivery work, with the same respectful dignity. His generosity extended even to financial sacrifices, sharing his limited resources with classmates who were struggling and volunteering his tutoring services for students who couldn't afford to pay. But beneath the surface of their marital bliss, Alexandra was beginning to feel the weight of her deception. While she had never directly lied to James about her background, her failure to reveal the full extent of her wealth was becoming an increasingly heavy burden. She watched him carefully, calculate every expenditure, stress about upcoming tuition payments, and work exhausting hours to maintain his financial stability, knowing that she could solve all his problems with a single phone call. The contradiction between James's financial struggles and Alexandra's hidden abundance created ethical dilemmas that she had not fully anticipated. When James's laptop broke, and he couldn't afford to replace it, Alexandra was forced to watch him borrow money from friends rather than simply buying him a new computer. When he worried about his student loan debt and its impact on their future together, she couldn't offer the reassurance that his concerns were completely unnecessary. Alexandra's inner conflict intensified as she realized that her deception, while well-intentioned, was preventing James from making informed decisions about their shared future. His career plans, their housing choices, and even their daily routines were all based on financial constraints that didn't actually exist. She was beginning to understand that honesty about her wealth was not just morally necessary, but practically essential for their relationship to function authentically. The turning point came on their 7th day of marriage, when James mentioned His concern about imposing financial burdens on Alexandra through their shared household expenses. His worry about whether she could afford to contribute to groceries and utilities revealed both his consideration for her welfare and his complete misunderstanding of their actual circumstances. Alexandra realized that she could no longer delay revealing the truth about her identity and wealth. The secret that had originally seemed like a way to protect their authentic connection was now threatening to undermine the very honesty and transparency that made their relationship special. James deserved to know exactly who he had married, and she deserved the opportunity to discover whether their love could survive the revelation of her true circumstances. As she prepared to have the most important conversation of their marriage, Alexandra was unaware that James was also harboring a secret that would prove even more shocking than her hidden wealth. The simple graduate student who had captured her heart through his integrity and authenticity was not exactly who he appeared to be, and his revelation would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, identity, and the nature of genuine human connection. 7 days into their secret marriage, Alexandra Montgomery sat in James's tiny studio apartment, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of academic life stacks of research papers, dog-eared textbooks, and the gentle hum of an ancient refrigerator that had become the soundtrack to their newlywed bliss. She had spent the entire morning rehearsing how to reveal her true financial status to her husband, crafting explanations that would minimize the shock while helping him understand her motivations for secrecy. But before Alexandra could begin her carefully planned confession, James emerged from the kitchenette with an expression of nervous determination that immediately redirected her attention. In his hands was a manila folder that she had never seen before, thick with documents that seemed far more substantial than his usual academic materials. His demeanor had shifted from the relaxed contentment that had characterized their first week of marriage to something approaching the gravity she had witnessed during his most serious academic discussions. James sat across from Alexandra, on the second-hand couch that served as their primary furniture, his hands trembling slightly. As he opened the folder and spread its contents between them, what Alexandra saw defied every assumption she had made about her husband's identity and circumstances during their 6 months of courtship and week of marriage. The first document was a bank statement from Credit Suisse showing account balances that exceeded even Alexandra's substantial wealth. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of millions of dollars spread across multiple accounts in currencies from around the world. The account holder's name was listed as James Sebastian Sullivan Blackstone, a hyphenated surname that immediately triggered Alexandra's recognition of one of Europe's oldest and most powerful banking dynasties. The revelation hit Alexandra like a physical blow as she began to understand the magnitude of James's deception. The struggling graduate student who worked 3 jobs to pay for his education, who carefully budgeted every grocery purchase, who had borrowed money from friends for basic necessities. This man was actually heir to a financial empire that dwarfed her own considerable fortune. Additional documents revealed the scope of James's true identity. He was the eldest son of Lord Edmund Blackstone, whose family had controlled European banking interests for over 2 centuries. The Sullivan-Blackstone fortune included investments in every major industry, real estate holdings across 3 continents, and art collections that filled private museums. James's inheritance alone was worth over $2 billion, making him one of the wealthiest individuals of his generation. But the financial revelations were only the beginning of Alexandra's shock. Academic transcripts showed that James had graduated summa cum laude from Oxford University with degrees in economics and international relations before completing a master's degree at the London School of Economics. His current doctoral program at Portland State was not his first advanced degree, but rather part of a deliberate journey to understand economic inequality from multiple academic perspectives. Letters of recommendation revealed that James had already established himself as a respected researcher in development economics, having published papers in prestigious journals and consulted for international organizations on poverty reduction strategies. His work had taken him to refugee camps, urban slums, and rural communities throughout the developing world, where he had witnessed firsthand the human cost of the economic systems that had generated his family's wealth. The most shocking revelation came through personal documents that explained James's presence in Portland and his deliberate adoption of a struggling student lifestyle. For the past 3 years, James had been living entirely on the income from his part-time jobs, having placed his inheritance in a trust that he could not access without formally claiming his family identity. His choice to live in poverty was not circumstantial but deliberate, a form of research and personal transformation that allowed him to understand the lives of those affected by economic inequality. Alexander realized that James's academic research was not abstract theoretical work, but deeply personal investigation into the moral implications of inherited wealth. His dissertation focused on the psychological and social impact of extreme wealth inequality, drawing from his own experience of living on both sides of the economic divide. His 3 jobs, his tiny apartment, his careful budgeting, all were authentic experiences that informed his understanding of economic justice. The folder contained correspondence with international development organizations, humanitarian agencies, and academic institutions that revealed the scope of James's future plans. Upon completing his doctoral degree, he intended to establish a foundation that would deploy his inherited wealth for systematic poverty reduction, educational access, and economic development in underserved communities worldwide. His years of voluntary poverty had been preparation for this responsibility, but perhaps the most profound revelation was a personal journal that James had maintained throughout his time in Portland, documenting his internal struggle with his inherited privilege and his search for authentic identity beyond his family's wealth. The entries revealed someone wrestling with fundamental questions about responsibility, authenticity, and the moral obligations that came with unearned advantage. The journal entries about Alexandra were particularly revealing. James had recognized her wealth from their first meeting, having researched her background after her university lecture. But rather than being attracted to her financial status, he had been drawn to her apparent discomfort with her privileged position and her genuine interest in using wealth for positive social impact. Their relationship had developed not despite their shared wealth, but because of their shared struggle with its moral implications. Alexandra realized that their entire courtship had been built on parallel deceptions, with each partner hiding their true financial status while seeking authentic connection beyond material circumstances. James's poverty had been as carefully constructed as her middle-class persona, both of them fleeing from inherited privilege towards something more genuine and meaningful. The irony was profound. 2 of the wealthiest young people in the world had found each other while pretending to be something else, their love developing through shared values about economic justice and social responsibility rather than mutual financial benefit. Their marriage represented not the union of opposites, but the coming together of kindred spirits who had disguised themselves to escape the burden of their circumstances. James's explanation of his deception revealed motivations that mirrored Alexandra's own. He had wanted to be loved for his character rather than his inheritance, to find partnership based on compatibility rather than financial advantage. His years of voluntary poverty had taught him the difference between authentic relationships and strategic alliances, making Alexandra's genuine affection even more precious to him. But the revelation also exposed the fundamental dishonesty that had characterized their relationship from its beginning. Both had made assumptions about the other's circumstances. Both had constructed elaborate deceptions to protect themselves, and both had been living a carefully maintained fiction that prevented authentic intimacy. Their love was real, but it had been built on a foundation of mutual misunderstanding. The moment of truth that followed their parallel confessions became a test of everything they claimed to value about honesty, authenticity, and unconditional love. They sat in James's tiny apartment, which Alexandra now understood was an elaborate stage set rather than his actual living situation, surrounded by evidence of their shared wealth and mutual deception. Their conversation extended through the kofa, afternoon, and into the evening, each revelation leading to deeper questions about identity, authenticity, and the nature of genuine connection between people who possessed more resources than they could ever personally use. They discussed their shared guilt about inherited privilege, their mutual desire to use wealth responsibly, and their recognition that they had found in each other not just romantic love, but intellectual and moral partnership. The discovery that they were both extraordinarily wealthy eliminated the economic inequality that Alexandra had worried about, but introduced new complexities about power dynamics, social responsibility, and public perception. Their marriage would now be viewed not as a romantic union across class lines, but as a consolidation of enormous wealth and influence that carried unprecedented responsibility. As night fell over Portland, Alexandra and James began planning their future with complete honesty. For the first time in their relationship, they would combine their resources and expertise to create one of the world's largest private foundations, dedicated to economic justice and poverty reduction. Their love story would become the foundation for systematic efforts to address the very inequality that had motivated their individual deceptions. The tiny studio apartment that had housed their brief experiment in ordinary life would be abandoned for something more appropriate to their actual circumstances. But the lessons learned during their week of authentic domestic bliss would inform their approach to wealth, responsibility, and partnership. They had discovered that love could indeed transcend economic circumstances, even when those circumstances were far more complex than either had initially understood. Their marriage had survived the revelation of parallel deceptions, emerging stronger through complete honesty and shared commitment to using their combined resources for positive change. The struggling student and the modest freelancer had revealed themselves to be partners in one of the most significant philanthropic enterprises in human history, their love providing the foundation for work that could transform countless lives around the world.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.